Hello and welcome to the Daily Bible Podcast. My name is William Hemsworth. Thank you so much for joining me for today's show. Well, as I record this, it is Memorial Day. Hope everyone has had a great weekend. And in the U.S., like I said, we're celebrating Memorial Day, which is the day to remember our fallen servicewomen who died in service of the country. So let's spend some time just to remember them as well. But today we're continuing on in Matthew chapter 12, and we're going to look at verses 3 and 4 today. So Matthew chapter 12 verses 3 and 4 say, "He said to them, 'Have you not read what David did when he was hungry and those who were with him? How he entered into the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which it was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for priests.'" Now, if you remember in the first couple verses of chapter 12, Jesus and the disciples are walking through a field of wheat on the Sabbath, and they're plucking wheat to eat because they're hungry, and the Pharisees are accusing them of harvesting, which is one of those things you were not allowed to do on the Sabbath. However, plucking you were allowed to because it was to satisfy hunger, and those two things were differentiated in the book of Deuteronomy. And so that brings us to today's verses, where the Pharisees are trying to entrap Jesus, and Jesus gives them a great response. You see, this is kind of a hit to the Pharisees' intellectual pride. So Jesus he's using this question to humble them. Have you not remembered about King David when he was hungry, how he and those who were with him ate of the bread of the presence? The bread of the presence was bread in the temple that only priests could eat. It symbolized the presence of God. Only the priests could eat it. It's kind of a precursor, Old Testament type of the Eucharist today. But Jesus uses the question to humble the leaders. And so Jesus draws on parallels from 1 Samuel chapter 21 verses 1 through 6 and what he's going through at the time with his disciples. And this is significant as well, because if you remember in previous shows, Matthew's gospel depicts Jesus as, like this new Moses, like this new David type character. He's in line of David's kingdom. This is kind of goes on with that motif. And so just as David and those who were with him were hungry in 1 Samuel chapter 12 verse 1, so we see that the disciples were hungry. And as David was the heir to the united kingdom of Israel, so Jesus is the son of David. And so he implies that if his disciples are sinning, then David would be guilty as well. You see, and condemning David is something that those Pharisees would never would do. So Jesus kind of had them in a conundrum here. He had them on the toes. He's calling out their double standards. Like, how can it be okay for David when he's hungry to eat the bread of the presence, which is a lot bigger than the grain of wheat that we're eating today? So Jesus is saying, if you're going to condemn me, you need to condemn David, which is something that the religious leaders would never do, because it would cause a riot. It would cause a riot in Israel if that were to happen. And so Jesus wasn't condoning disobedience to God's law, but he was emphasizing discernment and compassion in enforcing those laws. Well, thank you for joining me in this episode of the Daily Bible Podcast. I hope it was helpful. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it. Please email me at hopewithin18 if you have any prayer requests, comments, feedback. God bless you all, and thank you for joining me on today's episode. Have a great day.